Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Today I want to talk about the role of hardship in spiritual growth, more so the idea of hardship as an impetus for growth in a spiritual sense. I think that that's something that many of us can relate to or resonate with in some regard, that we have experienced it in some way, that we have had times of hardship that have resulted in really explosive points of spiritual growth in our practice that have gotten us to where we are now, that are responsible and major stepping stones for reaching, I would say, our current experience and state. And I think it would be nice to talk about that and to, I guess, share a bit of my own, just because that's what I know, that's my experience, and that's how I can speak about this topic. I think that in discussing and contemplating these points in time, we can really gain a better understanding of ourselves in a current circumstance. We, I guess, are an amalgamation of past experiences that make up a current human being in a lot of ways. Our past informs our present. It forms us as who we are. We're a big hodgepodge of those experiences. That's who we are, I guess, in some ways. So I figured we would delve into that. I think it's something that's really beautiful. I think that it's something that's really complex and sometimes difficult to speak about as well. And it's a little bit easier to brush those things aside and not have to dredge them up or confront them again in the present, because of course they were unpleasant. Hardship is by definition not a very pleasant thing. And I guess maybe hopefully in sharing some of my own, I feel like that'll be a nice exercise for me to get a little bit personal, because this channel and the topics I discuss are meant to be, I would say, personal to some regard. There's supposed to be some value, some teaching, or something that can be learned from what it is that I have to say. And if I'm speaking about values and speaking so vaguely, or speaking on topics and ideas, but don't really offer anything of myself into it, it feels like there's something that's lacking. So, getting right into it, today I pulled the Hangman card, and for me this is the perfect card to accompany this topic, the idea of hardship or perceptions being changed due to, I would say, the infliction of hardship, whether that be self-inflicted, whether it be environmental, a combination, what have you. And so, I guess I'll start with my story a bit here and what my own journey with hardship as a major growth spurt in spirituality, or my spiritual path is concerned. So, going back now, quite a while, not quite a while, but a while, I think I've been into tarot, magic, spirituality for a good portion of my late teens into, of course, now I'm 23, but I guess I didn't have this element of seriousness to it. It felt very surface level and vapid in retrospect, the way that I'm looking back at it up until the point that I'm about to discuss. So this all started late into my college life, or life at university, depending on where you're at in the world and how you reference, I guess, that sort of educational period in life. It was towards the end of that period, and there are many factors that came together that I think were very necessary but difficult, and that I would say served to be the impetus for a lot of growth to come that I'm now very thankful for, but at the time was really not, it was not a very pleasant time. So this is going to sound maybe a little bit, I don't know, silly in some ways to some people, but a big starting point for this was actually that nearing the end of my college experience, I had a really severe kind of bout of acne, and it got me really down. I went to school in New York City. To me, being there, it just felt like it is a city of materiality. It is a city where the artifice is on display, where we like to ignore the uglier truths, and everything is supposed to be shiny and bright. There's a lot of really beautiful people. I would say that the sense of self and the sense of worth being connoted and tied to ideas of presentation and surface appearance is really high there. And I would say building up now knowing this, building up throughout my life, I think I had invested a lot of my sense of self and worth and meaning and identity in my appearance. And so this being challenged by something that sort of, came and disrupted that appearance was something that was really pivotal and major and destructive in some ways, destructive in a beneficial way, in a long run sense. But at the time, it just felt devastating, and it took me many months to even realize why it was so devastating, why I felt the way I felt about it, and the turmoil I felt, and the isolation I put upon myself in that way, and the seemingly strange decisions I decided to make that all led towards something greater. So, leading up into that year of college, with the acne being the way that it was, I decided and took it upon myself that I wanted to set about achieving these very superficial and materialistic dreams, and thinking that they would substitute and kind of fill in that area for me that was lacking. And so, as opposed to letting things naturally progress, I forced and sort of worked my way into being able to live in an apartment in the city as opposed to dorming. I thought, oh, if I start this life, if I get the ball rolling and live on my own and begin to live in the way that I see myself wanting to live, the rest will fall into place. Little did I know that I was just making things worse, but I think I needed to make things worse to push myself to a certain point. So I wasn't happy, and I guess solution for this lack of happiness in my surface level, or in my identity really, was to try to feed that false, that fragile identity even further. So I really just gave all I had in I would say a way that wasn't very healthy into being able to live in the city. I made all of the rookie mistakes. I think if anybody here has lived in New York City or lives in New York City, it's not an easy place to live. It's not an easy place to find a place to live. And I made all of the rookie mistakes, endured all of the strife and struggle in trying to get to that point, got to that point, and had to maintain what I had created for myself. You can't just, I guess, live in New York City and rest on your laurels. There's a lot of work to be done. It's not it's an expensive city to live in. So I had my final year of college. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I got out, and in order to maintain, I had school full time, I had a retail job, and I also had an internship. The internship was unpaid, which is why I needed a job. Unpaid internships are probably one of the worst things out there, and that's a topic of its own. But so I had a lot going on. I was pushing myself to a lot of extremes in terms of work and I guess what I thought my values were and getting to certain points, and none of it was making me any happier. I was honestly pushing myself further and closer to this ultimate collapse. I was investing all money that I didn't even have really in trying to find almost like a cure or a fix for my appearance. I even used the return, this is really personal, I used the return money from my loans. So first of all, going to college in the US, I don't know who's within the US and who's outside of it, it's exorbitant, it's exploitative, it's honestly financially ruinous. And so I went to school halfway on a scholarship, but still I basically needed to come up with $40,000 a year, which happened through loans. So you ask for a certain amount in loans, it's never quite exact, so you get a return on these loans, and you get to keep that money. I mean, of course, it's money that was borrowed, and it's going to need to be paid back the full amount, but you get it in cash. And I spent that money, which was actually a good lump sum, I invested all of it in trying to find the cure for my ailment, my acne. I saw it as an ailment, and it was horrible. The amount of time and effort and tears spent on that was insane now that I think about it. And I just remember calling out of my obligations, getting home super late at night, having gotten up at 6 in the morning and getting home and feeling just so hopeless and drained and distraught, and the amount of days that I just felt like I couldn't do it, and I would look in the mirror and just not even feel able to walk out the front door. and to call in sick and to really push the boundaries of all of these various moving parts. It was crazy. There was a lot of days of just not being able to get out of bed and tears, and I remember spending weeks avoiding mirrors because I knew if I looked in a mirror I would break down and not be able to do anything. And eventually it started to occur to me that I was really just I guess my sense of self being in my identity was not stable, and I started to realize that what was really being challenged and destroyed was my sense of self and my identity, and the way that I chose, or where I chose to place those things, which was in an appearance. And long story short, although the story is already seeming to take on a life of its own, I really began to work on this and understand that it needed to change, and that that's what the root of the problem really was. And so I think I turned to my very surface level spiritual practice and my tarot practice, and decided that it needed to become something substantial. It needed to have some sort of meat to it, something that wasn't just me going through the motions. And even leading up to that, I remember there had just been such a lack of emphasis on those things, to the point where I barely had a spiritual practice. I was barely using tarot in the months leading up. And so I felt compelled. I did a little bit more research than I had in quite some time, and just kind of threw myself at it. And the product of that was actually this journal. And this is a journal I filled up in 2 or 3 months during that time. And I think that this, in some ways, potentially this is a little bit of a dramatic statement, but honestly maybe not. It saved my life, the practice that ensued and what came out of it in terms of my spiritual journey. So I remember that my new sort of thing was that I woke up every single morning. I recorded my dreams every single day, which are in here. I woke up every single morning and meditated for at least a half an hour. There were some days where I would meditate twice a day, but it was always for at least about half an hour, and I would always record my thoughts, my experiences. I would, I guess you could say, astral travel or journey. There are tons of synonymous terms that I think would all describe what went on, and I would describe my experiences. So I was so dissatisfied with my environment, with myself, that I turned inward, and I turned to this almost new place. And I had these teachers there. I don't know, I don't think I'm going to share any excerpts from this. This is probably one of the most personal things I have. I mean, this is honestly, the writings in here are so personal. So yeah, I think I was just the most, this was my most prolific personal writing period of my entire life, and the most personal at that. And going back, I've been reflecting on this the past few days, just because I've been feeling uninspired. Some of the, I would say, darker aspects and insecurities and shadows associated with that time and all that it entailed have been being prodded at. And so I actually returned to this journal for the first time since that point in my life, and was rereading some of these experiences, and just blowing my own mind, I guess, because it doesn't feel like the same person. It really feels like I'm reading the writings of a different human being. And I would record, it almost felt like a transcription, because there were individuals and beings and teachers that I'd meet with, and I would record the entire experiences, the dialogue, the major takeaways, the sensory experience, and so much more. I had dreams that would synchronize with these journeys and astral travels. I just remember even writing in here that I thought and wanted to take on or I would say set about reading tarot for others, and really honing my skills to the point where I thought I could maybe help others through reading tarot for them and becoming a reader in that way, which is something I didn't know was even synthesized, or a thought that really originated during this time. I had no idea. It just, I guess, kind of entered the back of my mind, and months later it really started to come to fruition. It's just wild to me that I can look back at this and really see a very detailed account of this spiritual, it feels like an awakening. Although I still had my practice before this period, I had my tarot practice and spiritual practice before this period. it was nowhere near the level it is today until this point in time. And honestly, I can say that where it is today is not to the same caliber of intensity and strength that it was during this time. And I find myself almost wishing I could have the intense experiences and the epiphanies and the breakthroughs and the realizations that I had during this time. I wish I could have them today, but I know that these came out of a necessity, a need. I was desperate, and this is the product of that. It's the product of spirituality out of necessity, as opposed to a luxury or a desire. And so that's what made it so powerful and potent. And I think many can relate to having had these experiences to some degree, and probably very vastly different experiences. I think mine seems a bit superficial, and I'm sure that there are those out there who have had truly life-altering and extremely difficult circumstances that I cannot hold the candle to. And I hope that in some regards, I do hope that most people don't ever have to go through these periods where they just feel like their life is completely shattered and ruinous, and depression sets in. I hope that these things don't occur for others, but at the same time, if you have already had that experience, if you're going through that experience, I think that there's a lot to be learned from that. And I also would like to invite you to share your experiences, and to know that it gets better, of course. I think that this period in time and the way that I turned to these various practices in some ways saved my life. It brought me to a much better place with myself. I don't think that I could ever... I feel so much stronger now. I feel like if the same exact circumstances were to befall me in the current sense, that I would be so much better equipped to handle them. That's not to say they would be easy or that I would handle them with excellence and not be fazed, but that I would have that knowledge of the past and my past self to turn to mitigate a lot of the hardship. I think I really needed to distance myself from who this person was, from these experiences, to kind of... I think they were just too close. I think that there wasn't enough time between that period and who that person was and who I was. And now I think there is enough distance, there's enough growth, and I'm far enough removed to be able to look at this, who I was, look at these experiences, and to appreciate and learn from them now. Learn from them by actually very methodically sifting through them. At the time, I was just learning through experience and through trial and error, and now I can continue to learn from this experience through reflection and acknowledgement of it. And so I'd like to encourage anybody who is going through a tough time to, one, document it to the best of your abilities, to experience it and find ways to remember it in the future. Because although in the present I was helping myself, I was experiencing, I was doing these things to get through the hardship, and the growth was occurring, I kind of have this second, almost like a reprise on the growth that I can now, because I can revisit those events and reflect on them as the person I am today and who I am now. And so I would love to know how others feel their hardships that were really the points of spiritual growth, or impetuses for spiritual growth, what that was like, why and in what ways you feel like it was valuable, in what ways it changed you, and if you have accounts of these things to be able to reflect on how those experiences have continued to facilitate and foster growth for you or to change you. It's just something that I found myself reflecting on in recent days, in considering how I felt about myself and my lack of inspiration. And I guess a lot of that had to do with, in my last video, I spoke about failure and magic, and I guess turning to and accepting certain failures. I think that video could have benefited from a different title or a different choice of words. I think what I was getting at really was the magic that could be found in acceptance of certain actualities and truths and circumstances, and the ability to grow and learn from them. I needed to feel like I could interact with something that harsh and powerful and overcome it. And so for me, failure actually was a word I needed to put to that experience. But I think underlying the real takeaway was a need for acceptance, or the magic that came out of acceptance. And so having had that point, and then still almost feeling like something was lacking, and then really realizing that I needed to return to my toughest moments, my hardest points in life, and to reflect and continue to grow from them and to accept them, because it was a chapter in my book that I'd written and that I'd continued on past, but I hadn't closed this chapter, or at least I hadn't revisited it and tied a nice neat little bow on it in the way that I think I needed to, and now I have. That's not to say I won't return to it, but that I feel like it has a neat sort of closure to it in having been revisited. And so I just wanted to share that for anybody who might benefit from my experience and learn from it and find some value in it, for anybody who's potentially going through it right now, for anybody who has gone through it and can relate, and we can kind of resonate with each other and connect in that way. I just thought that would be nice, and so that's what I have to share. I hope it was helpful. I hope that it maybe brought up some emotions and feelings and thoughts for you that are helpful in some way. Let me know what you thought. I hope you are all well. Until next time, bye.